Hey, fam. Thanks for coming. All right, we're going to have a fun discussion tonight. We have Professor Parks in the wings, Joe Hanvey, and then Lucas, aka Mordwan, is going to be here in just a few minutes. So I'm going to bring these guys up. Professor Parks, Joe Hanvey, welcome to my humble Run Boston Bear channel. I think I've got like 1,300 subscribers now, which is pretty cool because I never intended on having like a big channel or anything like that. I never was even going to put my face out there, but I got into this whole conversation of like, what is this realm that we live in? Is it actually a globe spinning in space, or is it something different? I was like, that's crazy. Why would it be anything other than a globe in space? This was like 3 years ago, and I have 3 small kids and one more on the way. And I'm like, I should look into what is the truth of where we live, or what is even this topic, so that I can best share with my kids what I think the truth is, or tell them the options and let them critically think and work it out. Not tell them what the earth is, but tell them that there are maybe other options to think about. So welcome, Joe, and Professor Parks. Mordwan will be here in a minute. I'm going to hand it over to you guys. I'll just start with Professor Parks, and tell us a little bit about background of what you do, who you are, anything you want to share, and then we'll move it over to Joe.
Sure. Howdy all. I am on the tubes. I go by Professor Parks, PhD, but I'm Dr. Rob Parks. My doctorate is in astronomy. I'm a non-traditional student, as it were, in that I went through normal undergraduate and I got my master's degree in astronomy. Took some time off, taught physics and astronomy, and then decided to go back and get my PhD later in life. My research interests are in basically, they're called young stellar objects, stars and planets as they are forming, and also magnetically active stars. These days, I am mostly concentrated on public outreach and education. I also have a YouTube channel. I don't have I think I might have half the subscriber base that you do, Boston. But yeah, so on that channel, I talk about astronomy, flat Earth, and my own mental health, which I've had numerous struggles with. And then I'll just close out by saying I am a Christian, but I am not a Bible literalist. I do not hold to the Bible literally, meaning that God created the earth in 6 days. And so my experience of where we live is, at least from an astronomical point of view, is one of practice.
Yeah, before we go to Joe, I want to say, folks in the chat, go check out Professor Parks' channel. I linked it in the description below. He's got a great intro, and I just think he's a fun guy. So check him out. Yeah, Joe, take it away.
Well, my background is not really in formal sciences. I've just always loved science. I'm an entrepreneur. I run my own business, and since I can remember, from the time I was a little kid, I've just loved science. I've loved the nature and outdoors and anything to do with the different sciences, whether it be biology, microbiology, agriculture, astronomy, astrology, all the different sciences, just across the board. I just really enjoy it. I've always loved trying to figure out how things work, and that's really what I like to do more than anything, is try to figure out how things work and then see if I can set up demonstrations and models in a way that can visually show those things in fairly accurate detail, I guess is a good way to put it. I also identify as a believer in Jesus. At the end of the day, my faith is the strongest part of my life. It's what has gotten me to where I'm at today. It has literally saved me and changed me and made me a completely different person. So I'm not really a biblical literalist either necessarily. I think of it like, if we try to put God into a box, whether it's literal, allegorical, metaphorical, I think he's all of those things all at once. So if we try to say, well, it's all literal, or it's all allegorical, or it's all poetic, then we're putting God in a box that he can't fit in. And I think that we've got to open our minds to thinking more outside of the box if we want to kind of get past this stagnant state that we seem to be in. that's just kind of where I stand.
Okay.
Like that. Yeah. While we're waiting on Mordwan to show up, I'll just say, just to kill some time, as the TFE was presented, the final experiment and everything going on down in Antarctica, as the months were leading up to it, obviously I was anticipating what was going to happen, what would they see. I had all kinds of questions, and what really threw me for a little bit of a loop was before even the data came out, which I know a lot of people were really upset with how long it's taken to get certain data or certain videos or whatever. The almost like everything was a gate. Everything was fabricated or fake, or
Fakergate.
yeah, all of it. And really the attacks that it's not so much just flat versus globe attacks, but flat attacking other flat, or just human beings attacking other human beings. And in a way, I pulled back from the community, not to distance myself from drama or anything like that. I'm in this to learn, and I enjoy engaging in conversations with people, hearing what they think, what they believe, where they're at as a person, not just attacking them for what they believe or where they're at as a person. That's ridiculous. Like, what, I know it sounds silly, but just like sitting around a campfire or going camping with just like a group of friends and maybe some people you don't know there, you get to know them over a weekend, just talking and enjoying meals. For me, that's life and that's living. And that's why I am who I am and have this channel, is to get to know people on a heart level. And some people are like, oh, Run Boston Bear, you're too soft, or you're too whatever. They say, some people say I'm like a shill, or some people have told me that I'm demonically possessed because I'm like calm and gentle, and they don't understand it. But yeah, I just I don't know. Do you have any opinions on the weird aftermath from that observation?
Oh, go ahead, Joe.
I would say it's you're right for pulling back, because that's the way that went is very fruitless. And just all the accusations and the impatience and everything. And I think there were a lot of false expectations on the flat earth side going into it. And that kind of led to a lot of what we saw. But yet that kind of reaction to me is vain and fruitless, and we're never going to get anywhere acting like that. So, it's unfortunate, but that's what we saw.
Yeah, I put out a couple of videos about this. I think it was a couple. Anyway, and so my experience is with Jaron. Obviously, the biggest fallout has been with Jaron in the sense that he has disavowed the community and is now going his own way. I think he is now he now sees the Earth as a globe, but I don't know for absolute certainty. I've never heard him say it. But what I took from it was a certain sense of irony in that, as he pointed out, everything was a gate. Everything was, his the people on his channel were nitpicking everything they could get with his videos, saying, oh, this is fake, this is fake. And Jaron was like, no, this is real. You need to accept this. And the irony to me is that I've seen Jaron do that to Globe evidence of previous videos of the 24-hour sun. And I just, to me, it's like, so it wasn't good for the goose, but it's good for the gander because it's you. People should start taking these things on faith, as opposed to just critically thinking about them. So, but yes, it was the threats and the vitriol that Jaron got is inexcusable. He didn't deserve that. No one deserves that. So.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. Have y'all watched some of Mark Herman's after videos? That's Candace Owens' producer. He's got a YouTube channel, and he's put out some cool clips and some 360 cam stuff. And he's been really chill. Like he's a globe believer, but just so based and a funny guy. So I might have to drop that, or if somebody can drop that, Mark Herman's YouTube in the chat, that'd be great.
Did he recently just do an interview with her or a podcast with her?
Oh, I'm not sure. I know Witset's supposed to interview with Candace at some point, and Witset's taking a break as well, just from all the the attacks. I mean, there's a lot of slander. There's just the vitriol, like you guys were talking about, and I mean, I know it can be intense. I mean, Professor Parks, you had the first in the field talk with him, and I mean that was like a 3-hour, 45-minute conversation. It was phenomenal, just the way you guys handled the conversation. But yeah, I wish him the best, his family the best. I know he's got 2 daughters, and him taking care of his family, I think, is important right now. And I don't think he's gone. He's just taking a break.
Yeah, I think once anybody puts their face out there in this argument, they're going to get a lot of vitriol from what I call couch critics. You know, internet cowboys, that kind of stuff. It's unfortunate. People think that they just have the right to have access to you because you put yourself out there too, and it's very odd in a sense.
Hey, Lucas, Mordwan, let me check your mic.
Hey, how's it going?
Are you feeling all right? I know you were feeling under the weather, brother.
They nebulized me and they gave me some cough medicine, so I'm now able to speak. So.
There you go. Well, we just did some intros, and if you want to talk about your background or what you're into, and what kind of brought you into the community of, just really share anything you want about yourself, and then we'll just kind of dive into some deeper stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm a long-term researcher. Been working in various scientific fields at mostly at junior level most of the time, although now I'm sort of at the senior level in industrial data science. Your mileage may vary as to whether that counts as a true science, but I certainly follow the scientific method, collect data, analyze data, develop hypotheses, test hypotheses, build models, things of that nature. And yeah, I've worked in probably the coolest project we've done was a thermodynamics model for a potash solution mine in Canada, which basically allowed them to get advanced decision intelligence on their inputs to the mine to improve operations by modeling, all of the aspects of heat flow and things of that nature. So, and at the moment, I got heavily into this online debate scene. Just found it super interesting. Been learning a lot, and I think for me, it's just important to get what I think is the.
We lost him.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I noticed his video is a little bit flaky.
He's back. Let's try again. All right, you back?
Yeah, is my internet bad here?
Yeah, it was kind of cutting out a little bit. You weren't clipping bad, but yeah, it's a little bit clippy.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, I've had a lot of debates, but more so what I'm interested in tonight is, and it's awesome to be on a panel with Dr. Parks and Joe, and moderated by a person such as yourself.
Brother.
Kind of like, how did you get to where you are? Whether it's the traditional, more, I don't know, materialistic, let's say, cosmology, or the cosmology that Joe subscribes to, given that you've both done, astronomical observations and such.
Yeah, I look forward to letting these two kind of go at it about what they've experienced, what they've seen, and I know that both of them are a wealth of knowledge when it comes to sky observations. And I do want to give you credit, Mordwan, for putting this together. You reached out to me you actually reached out a while ago and said, hey, man, I'd really be interested in having some more chill conversations. You seem like a chill guy. I know that there's the debate scene, and, we got modern day debates, which is great to see and watch when people just really go at it. But I also wanted to have a place where it's not necessarily a debate to the death, or the purpose here is for us to beat each other up. But the purpose here, I hope, is to hear what the other people are saying. So like I was telling Joe earlier, when you guys speak, I'm going to humble myself, and I'm going to put myself in the position that, what if I have flat earth wrong? What if I'm wrong about what I believe the earth to be? I need to listen to you as if you have the truth for me to grasp and hear and understand. And then when Joe speaks, maybe we don't have to just try to just immediately come with a comeback. Let's hear what he's saying and almost come at it like maybe he has something for us to glean knowledge or information from. Not that, it's not about he's right or you're right, but this is just more about a fun conversation. So if you have anything else, Mordwan, jump in anytime. I'm not going to really say a whole lot. I just want Joe and Professor Parks to maybe go back and forth a little bit on some neat things they've seen either in the field or maybe even in the classroom.
Yeah, I guess if you don't mind me directing the conversation a little, could we get maybe like an opener from Joe and from Dr. Parks to suggest, how they got into astronomy and watching the sky and sort of what that background looks like and how that plays into their understanding of our place in the cosmos?
That'd be fantastic. Yeah.
You want to go first?
Okay, I can go first. I like talking, particularly about myself. So I knew I wanted to be an astronomer in the 7th grade. Prior to that, I wanted to be a geneticist. Basically, I wanted to be a mad scientist. But in my physical science textbook, I read about Dr. Vera Rubin and her investigations into dark matter. And I don't remember why, but that sold it to me. This idea that there was this mystery out there, this mysterious material out there that we could not see, but we could see the effects of. That, yeah, I was hooked at that point. Getting into it, as I was going through my education, I initially wanted to kind of go in that vein of cosmology. I wanted to study the universe, dark matter, and all that. And then I hit the math and was like, no, I don't think this is not as fun as I thought it was going to be. Then I transitioned over to, as you do, aliens. And so I wanted to know everything that I could about exoplanets.
I'll be right back, fellas.
No problem. And at the time, there weren't a lot of planets discovered around other stars, but we did know about a lot of these young stellar systems where you had a star that was recently forming and a disk of material around it that we believed would host planets one day. And so that's when I got into it. And so for me, it's always been just fascinating to know how the universe as a whole works, because it helps me understand the grandeur of the cosmos, the grandeur of the creation. It provides me with perspective as to, we have all of this turmoil going on right now, particularly in the States, but, it allows me to get off of or get out of that, to think about the fact that the universe has vastly much more to it than what we deal with on our everyday life. And I will end by just saying that in terms of God, I've said before, if I am if I have a moral question, if I have to try to figure out how I should react, how I should treat people, how I should act in society, I go to the Bible. I do not go to this Introduction to Modern Astrophysics. This is science. This has nothing to say about morality. However, on the flip side, if I want to know how the planets are forming or how the planets go around the sun, I don't look for the Bible for answers. So,
great. That was a great answer, Dr. Parks. Thanks so much. Joe, I guess, do you mind speaking to a similar vein?
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely nowhere near like the probably caliber of mathematics and astrophysics that you guys are. That's for sure. I'm just a hobbyist that, my business and my family take precedence over all this stuff. So, but I've always loved astronomy. I can remember being a little kid and my dad taking me outside and showing me Pleiades in the sky and me just thinking, wow, that's so cool. I want to know more about it. I've just always loved trying to figure out how things work. And my faith journey did lead me down the road to what I like to describe as an enclosed universe level Earth. I guess is a good way for me to put it. So my faith did lead me that way, but it took me a while to find my true faith because I never was really raised one specific way. Now, my family would have identified as Christian, But I didn't really grow up in church or anything like that. I think when I was little, we went to church for maybe a couple of years. But my whole childhood into my young adult life, I didn't really have much of any faith or anything that I could really point to. And I think probably, no, not probably, it was 2004. I just had some life-changing things happen, and I started wondering, well, if this place is created, who created it? How's it made? What is it? Why did he make it the way he did? Why am I here? Those kind of questions, And so I just started studying all the different religions of the world and looking into all the different sciences and all the different explanations and models behind what everyone thought and believed, all the way back into what they tell us historically. And then when I came to the knowledge of the enclosed universal level Earth, as I would put it, I just started really pulling away from studying anything of men anymore and just started trying to figure it out myself. Now, as far as what led me into astrophotography and really tracking the sky, well, I was like, well, if I'm ever going to model the sky, I've got to kind of know how it works. And the best way to know how it works is to stop reading books and start actually tracking it yourself. So I'm a big proponent for experience is always better than book knowledge. Don't get me wrong, book knowledge is great, but you can read as many books as you want. And until you gain that experiential knowledge, then you just don't have the same level of understanding, in my opinion. Now, if you got both, then that's even stronger. So, but that's what led me into the astronomical side of it. Debates of creation versus evolution for all these years, faith over atheism kind of debates, leading up to this really kind of growing debate now of what is our realm, who's got the right model, is there a right model, that kind of thing. But I love astrophotography. It's become a huge passion of mine. And personally, from where I stand now, I think it evidences that we are in a younger, smaller, enclosed realm.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a great introduction from both of you. I think that this idea of enclosed seems to be kind of the key thing I hear from a lot of people. Ron Boston Bear and I have chatted about that a little bit, and I think it may be. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong because I'm not a biblical guy, but it kind of goes back to this idea of like rakia or expanse or firmament that's been like hammered out. So I'm curious if maybe you and Dr. Parks want to go back and forth on and sort of from a friendly perspective, not so much for a debate, in terms of like maybe stating why you think the evidence points one way or another. And to your point, coming from an evidentiary point of view, from observations you've either done personally or of people in the field that have done, if that sounds good.
So actually, I wanted to ask Joe, you said that you came, the more you looked into it, the more you came to believe that in the dome and the flat Earth. Can I ask why? What was it about it that drew you to it?
There's many things, really. I mean, I couldn't put my finger on just one, but if you wanted me to start with the largest, most fundamental is the container. Everything needs a container. Water needs a container. Gas pressure needs a container. Light needs a medium, a container, and a charge. So those foundationally from the start, we have less special pleading with the enclosed universal level Earth. Because we have a container, we have less special pleading. So from the start, fundamentally, it's a better argument. And I would say that would be where I would start with that argument.
Okay. So why? So when you say special pleading, obviously you mean gravity.
Not just gravity.
Okay.
Dark matter, dark energy. I mean, I would say the globe got rid of the ether just to replace it with dark matter, dark energy, dark flow, other things. So from my understanding of ether, which is not all that extensive, dark matter is certainly not really equivalent. Dark energy could be, but even in current science, dark energy doesn't affect local
behavior pretty much at all. It's a cosmological effect as opposed to a local one. So when we talk about the Earth specifically, really the containment is just that. It's just gravity. So why is that not sufficient, I guess?
Well, gravity is not a container.
Well, it is a force.
It's not a force.
Well,
it's the bending and warping of space-time.
It is, yes, but it can be treated as a force. It causes things. It causes the motion of things. It causes the acceleration of things.
Well, if we're talking about the 9.8 meters per second squared, that's a downward vector. I would just argue that's a downward vector attached to electrostatics and can be answered through electrostatics, just a downward electric bias. And then you throw in buoyancy and density, but I don't really have a problem with calling the downward vector gravity, if that's what people want to call it. There is this natural downward bias. So if that's the name people want to give it, but gravity in the way that we were taught when I was in school is not what gravity is even explained to be today. As a matter of fact, most of the people that I've listened to or talked to will tell you they don't really understand gravity that well, and nobody does.
I'll get back to that in a second. In terms of gravity, and I've heard this explanation particularly from Austin, who says that electrostatics can explain the 9.8 meters per second squared. I have on my channel somewhere Galileo's famous inclined plane experiment, where he demonstrated that masses will accelerate downward at 9.8 meters per second, regardless of their mass. So in a vacuum, a feather and a hammer will fall at the same rate. The thing is, you can derive that 9.8 meters per second squared from the universal law of gravitation. You put in the mass of the Earth, you put in the radius of the Earth, you put in the gravitational constant, the acceleration is 9.8 meters per second squared. Electrostatically, I have never seen that kind of explanation. And so for me, I would love to see that. If you can figure out what the charges of these things are and actually calculate that the expected acceleration is 9.8, then I'm definitely interested.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the 9.8 meters per second squared with me, though, is one, I fundamentally don't accept the heliocentric, barycentric, whatever people want to call it, model right off the start, because of the container, but for many other reasons. But when we talk about the 9.8 meters per second squared, downward velocity, downward bias, whatever people want to call it, downward vector, one, it's not even a constant. It's an average. It's an agreed upon average. And
it's not an average, but it is, you're right. It is not a constant. Little g is not a constant.
So, and it's in a vacuum. And so that to me in and of itself is kind of a problem. We're not in a vacuum. We're in a pressurized system. So, and to have pressure, you have to have a solid barrier. Gravity is not a solid barrier as far as what we can test and reproduce. So if we have gas pressure and we have a container, then that container will most likely, we see stratification not only in sediments, we see it in gases too. So if you have a container, then you're going to get a gas gradient at some point, especially if there is pressure mediation within that container to some degree. But yeah, I mean, as far as gravity itself, like if we're talking about little g, 9.8 meters, it's not a constant. It's an agreed upon average, and it's in a vacuum. Nobody's ever tested it in a vacuum, let's say a vacuum the size of the Empire State Building. So, we drop a hammer and a feather from that height. Nobody's ever really done that. And then again, if I'm not mistaken, it's been a while since I've really read up on the specific area here. That should change depending on our placement upon the oblate spheroid slightly. So there's just a lot of issues with that with me personally, whereas I feel like one, electrostatics is what I think it's 36 times stronger than gravity or something, 36 magnitudes stronger than gravity.
Right.
And it's always present, even in a vacuum. So, and I think electrostatics is coming from the ether itself. I think the ether is the background medium in which all things exist. Now, there's a lot to unpack there, but that's the medium in which all things exist. Is not a cosmic foam, in my opinion. It's the ether, and it's just kind of. I'll pass it back to you and see what you have to say about that.
Okay, a couple things.
Sorry, Rob. Do you mind if I just insert myself real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
There's just one thing in particular with regards to the sort of title of the presentation tonight that I thought would be interesting to get your feedback on, in particular, Rob, because I think one of the things Joe said that I hear epistemologically from a lot of flat earthers is that they want to see these things sort of like demonstrated in some sense in a controlled lab setting. And for me, like in regards to like the work that you've both done with astrophotography, it would seem that viewing planets as sort of spheres, and especially ones that are made of gas, satisfies that reproducible requirement. And I'm sure Joe and yourself have both taken photos of, or been at observatories where photos are taken of the gas giants. Mm-hmm. So if that is an interesting place to, please do. If you had something you'd rather say, then I don't want to insert myself too much.
No, I mean, so when you're talking about, I've often raised this question. I think other people have raised this. If you want to see evidence of gravity holding in an atmosphere, then look at Jupiter, for example. But that is predicated on their acceptance of that gravity is actually the container. Now, I just wanted to point out a couple of different things. There's one, little g is not an average. Little g is an approximation. So it is measured specifically at your location above the center of the Earth. And depending on that height, that is going to give you 9.8 number. And if you're higher than that, if you go higher in altitude, that number is going to decrease. You can see this on an airplane. If you take a kilogram weight in the terminal, put it on digital balance, wait until you're high up in the sky where there's basically no turbulence, look at it again, and you will definitely see a noticeable change in its weight. So it is, yes, it is variable in height. Electrostatics is not everywhere. Yes, you're right, in that electrostatics is like 34 times greater in magnitude than gravity is because of the Coulomb's constant. But what is important is that you need charged particles in order for electrostatics to work. And we have found that most everything in the universe, particularly on large scales, is electrically neutral. The Earth has basically an electric neutral charge. The Moon has an electrically neutral charge. As far as I know, the Sun is also pretty much electrically neutral. So there's no way for those forces to explain what we're seeing. Whereas with gravity is always present because of the fact that it is the curvature of space-time. Now, I want to go back to something else you said where we don't understand gravity. We can't describe it. That, I think, is often taken out of context. If you want to talk about how gravity behaves in an everyday terrestrial life, like how gravity affects someone building a building, we know that very well. We know we can use the law of gravitation and other engineering laws or other physics laws to build the building to spec. Now, so that really isn't a question. The universal law of gravitation has been shown to work. It is in buoyancy. If you actually look into how buoyancy is described, you need to have gravity there in order for it to work. And then also, but when it comes to what we don't understand, yes, we still have some questions about relativity, but we're talking on cosmic scales. We don't know how gravity works when it's really, really small or in a really, really small space, like below the radius of an atom. And we also don't really know what gravity is doing on spatial scales of the universe itself, so tens of billions of light years. So I would push back on the fact that we don't understand gravity. So.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say to that, I don't like staying on the gravity argument too long, because that seems like one that just doesn't really get us anywhere. Because I mean, you think it does exist. I think it doesn't exist. Not that I don't think it exists. I just don't. I see it as a concept that's been applied to reality. So it's I guess a concreteness fallacy is a good way to put it, in my opinion. You're applying concreteness to something that's not really concrete. So that's just kind of where I stand with it. But as far as the astronomical side of things, and I wanted to touch on the spheres. I don't think looking at circles at an undetermined distance in the darkness, we can say unequivocally that they are spheres. Like, I can literally reproduce that by using objects that aren't spheres in a dark room with a camera. And I could tell you that circle on the wall is 100 meters away, or I could tell you that it's 20 meters away, and you wouldn't be able to know by looking through the camera or the telescope. So, and it, you know, I could have a circle, a sphere, an oblate sphere, a concave surface, all in that dark area that you're looking at through the camera. And you're not going to be able to, one, tell me distance, size, or shape based on what you're seeing through the camera alone without other information. And that's just kind of where I've taken pictures of individual stars, not wandering stars, the wandering stars. And I get a lot of flack from the flat earth community for my astrophotography, because the wandering stars do look like we see. They do look like that. And the overwhelming majority of flat earthers put out of focus videos, out of focus pictures. And it's because they went into it with bias. They saw all these videos and pictures to start with, and they thought, oh, that's in focus, instead of learning how to focus and learning the optics and learning how focusing and even taking pictures of an individual star is very, very different than taking pictures of, say, the moon or the sun or nebula or galaxies or things like that. There's different applications that you're using to get the correct picture. But as far as seeing them as spheres, I don't see them that way. They do look spherical, but arguably I would say that the moon is concave, and astrophotography of its surface up close actually evidences that. And I can reproduce moon phase cycles with a concave luminescent moon inside of a dome, moving in a relative position to another greater light. So if I make a concave moon with craters on it that lights up on its own, and I move it inside of a dome with another light source representing the sun, I can get moon phases to happen the exact same way that we're told they happen under the heliocentric model as far as visually. So within the model, I can actually show how moon phases work. I can show how lunar eclipses work. I can show how ocean currents work. I can show how tides work. I can show how Noah's flood worked, and that's for the believers out there. I've got explanations for redshift and blue shift, day and night, time zones, and navigation, the 24-hour sun, 24-hour moon at times. Really, as far as if we were to go demonstration for demonstration in a physical model, I would win.
Okay, that's a claim. So I guess where I'm trying to go with this is that I don't doubt that you can show these things in a using the set that you have behind you. The issue that I come from is where I'm motivated is data. I am most motivated by what I can predict using hard numbers. So, for example, solar eclipse, using a heliocentric model, I can tell you where the next solar eclipse is going to be and when, down to the second. Whereas I think with your model, you can't do that. You can only qualitatively show how a solar eclipse would work on your flat Earth.
Well, I would argue that's not true, that the Saros cycle, it's a cyclical set of events. And that if you just follow the cycle, you can predict them quite accurately on either model. I would agree that you can do it on either model. However, even within the heliocentric model, when you look at the predictions ahead of time, they actually change as you get closer to the date. So it's never perfect down to the minute, years in advance. They do adjust as we get closer to the date. But as far as just in the few years that I've been tracking the sky, I can go out now and look at the moon at certain times and be like, okay, in a few days, it's going to eclipse this star, or it's going to occult this star because of its position, how it's moving between the tropics, just from watching the sky, because it's a clock. The sky is a clock, and it's a really accurate one. And to me, that also screams that we are central. Really, I thought this conversation was going to be about the Copernican principle, the cosmological principle, the mediocrity principle, whatever people want to call it. But what that tells me is the fact that the sky is so precise and that it is a clock, that is evidence, more evidence for the geocentric claim. Now, whether people want to say it's a sphere or, like I believe, it's a level enclosed realm, then still I think it points to a central position, a special position in which we live.
All right. So I want to adjust one thing because of Lucky is saying this, and you had said this. In every single one of my astronomy classes, I start off with the pale blue dot, which is an image taken by Voyager. And Carl Sagan was the one responsible for it. He was the one who actually pushed for them to change Voyager, I think it's Voyager 1's orientation. And he refers to it as a mode of dust in the sunbeam. And people have looked at that, Sagan included, and have made this argument that we are insignificant because of that. I tell my students, I diametrically oppose that. When I see that we are a dust mote suspended in a sunbeam, how can we not be more significant? That's us. There's nowhere else. We are nowhere else as far as we know. That's it. To me, that is absolutely precious, because if that were to wink out, we would be gone. So the idea that makes us insignificant in some way, I don't see it. And I actually would love to know people's perspective as to why it seems to inform people that makes you insignificant.
Yeah, this is somewhere that you and I agree wholeheartedly. Like, even when I was a heliocentrist, very centrist, whatever, it still had to be created in my mind, and it still had to be super precise, and down to the fact that it would make us extremely special. I think that argument comes more from the atheistic side, or people who just, either atheistic, agnostic, or people who just don't want to answer to any sort of God at all. So that's where I think that argument comes from the most, not really the majority. That's kind of more of a fringe type of argument that that we're not special. However, it does imply the evolutionary time frame and the evolutionary teaching that's tied into the Big Bang Theory does imply that we're not necessarily special, because there could be millions of other potential Earths and millions of other potential races, whether they be humanoid or whatever. So, in that sense, it does kind of imply that there is no special. And the Copernican principle literally pretty much says there is no special place, that we're not in a special place. That's to oversimplify it.
Yeah. So mechanically speaking, it makes the Copernican principles, because science does not speak about morality or ethics. It does not speak to the emotional significance or spiritual significance of something. all the Copernican principle states is that there is no preferred mathematical position from where you can measure all things. Anywhere is just as good as anywhere else. And what's odd is, for me, with geocentrists, is that they will use that to argue that geocentrism is right, but they will then say that the Earth must be the preferred position. Now, in terms of there's a lot of things there that I want to get to. One, I will just state that just with the Saros cycles, again, the Saros cycle does not predict location. It simply predicts basically when something is going to occur down to, well, I actually don't know how precise it is, but it doesn't predict location. It just says that at this time, a solar eclipse is going to be seen somewhere. We don't use the solar cycle or Saros cycle for predicting eclipses. We use the ephemerae of the Earth, Moon, Sun system. And the reason why it's constantly getting updated is because that system is dynamic. The time frames, the universe is not a perfect clock. If you want to have an example of that, look at the equation of time for the sun. The sun changes its time between from mean solar noon all the time, and it's extremely complicated to actually determine that correctly. So I've heard this idea of the universe being a clock, and I've backhandedly said the same thing. But when you look into it, it's really not a great clock. Leap day. If it was a great clock, why do we have leap days? Why do we have leap seconds? Why has the calendar always been messed with throughout history? If it were a great clock, then we should have basically set it and forget it. But when it comes to the other thing, I remember, I've often heard that people in the same breath will say evolution and Big Bang. Those are two different theories in two different branches of science. Big Bang Theory has nothing to say about how life progresses at all. It just is talking about the evolution of the universe. And the only things that they have in common, sort of, is that the Big Bang Theory states that, horrible TV show, by the way, the Big Bang Theory only states that the universe is old, that the universe is, at the time, right now, we believe it to be 13.8 billion years old. Evolutionists will then say that lines up with the theory of natural selection, because the theory of natural selection requires a large time scale in order for you to get from single-celled organisms to us. And then lastly say is, when you're talking about, with the Big Bang, will also, you have the possibility of other worlds and all of that. That's true. However, evolution basically states that it is, pun intended, astronomically unlikely that there is another species that evolved in the exact same way as us. Again, therefore making us unique to this world, unique in the eyes of the Creator. And so, again, precious. I don't care if there are Vulcans out there. That makes no difference to me as to whether or not I'm a child of God and that God loves me. And again, I would think that He would love me even more because He made me human for reasons that I don't comprehend.
Absolutely. You mind if I interject a couple thoughts real quick?
Sure.
I'm in this for truth. Like, what is the truth? And you guys have talked about some things over my pay grade. I understand what you guys are talking about and understand the debate, because it just goes in circles. It seems like it goes around and around. But in my opinion, if the scriptures are true, or if the literal account of creation, which I know Dr. Parks, you might not subscribe to, but the day 1 to day 7 is a cycle, and on the 7th day He rested. And I'm of the opinion that the entire human race is designed to rest with the Heavenly Father at the same time and enjoy creation, each other, a meal, chill out, don't work, don't make anybody else work. That's been forgotten. I think that there was once 28-day, a month was 28 days, and there were 13 months, and that was just set. You mentioned the calendar being messed with. And then I believe, this is what I think, that the new day actually starts when the sun begins to rise, but we are programmed to believe that midnight is the beginning of the new day. A lot of this stuff has to do with manipulation, kind of a tactic to make us uncomfortable. There's a lot of stuff out in the world that's fear-based, trauma-based, mind control sort of stuff. And there are people in the chat that are like, dude, Run Boston Bear, JT just lost his mind. What is he talking about? But I do believe in a deceiver and an enemy or someone or an entity of darkness that's trying to steal and kill and destroy connection, human connection and love. And then the new year, I think starts April 1st, yet they made it April Fool's Day and they tell us January 1st. It makes more sense to me that the new year begins when everything begins to spring up. And what I'm getting at is, if the truth is the Creator had a system and a way for things to work, and like Joe was talking about, this perfect sky clock that repeats so perfectly that even like shooting stars, they know when they're going to happen on what night because they happened before. Then I've got to question who or why has this been done? And it's obviously to distract us and divide us and make us hate each other for even thinking, if you think different or if I think different. And that's why I have this channel. And, I don't know if you want to go anywhere with any of that stuff, but man, it's got me wondering about all of it.
Well,
yeah, I'd say
so
one thing,
Sorry, go around, take turns.
One thing that Rob and I agree on is that, like even when I was a heliocentric believer, like it absolutely has to be created either way, and it makes us special either way. We agree there. I agree with that 100%. And as far if I made the implication that I was tying the Big Bang and evolution as a unit, I didn't mean to do that either, because obviously those are two different things, but they use one another in certain ways. But yeah, so I agree that even if we were in a heliocentric model, that because of the precision necessary, it just screams that there's a designer, that this is a special place, and that we are special. So I agree with that as well.
So, sorry, Maura. There is a field of science, or a philosophy of science, as it were, called intelligent design. I don't really, in principle, I am an intelligent designer in the sense that I believe that the universe is intelligently designed by God. But that's as far as it goes. In the specifics, intelligent designers will say that they will look into the motives, into why God created things a certain way. I don't do that, because God is way cooler than I am, way smarter than I am, and trying to guess at the thinking of God based on astronomy is a bit more than I want to do. But you talked about the clock, based on 28 days. That's a lunar clock. That's what the Judaism still holds to that. That is also problematic, because I think it has every so often you got to insert a 13th month that has 2 weeks in it, because again, it's not 20. The numbers aren't round and whole. So to me, that doesn't sound like a perfect clock, particularly if it's intelligently designed to be a clock for us to use. Because if that's the case, then he's made it kind of more complicated than it needs to be. But I want to say something. I want to stress something.
Go ahead.
Quickly, is that so I don't care for fundamentalists of any stripe, or I take issue with fundamentalists of any stripe, in the sense of someone who says that something does not exist, does not exist. And if you believe in that something existing, you are evil. And so for me, atheism has fundamentalists, and those are what I call anti-theists. Hawkins or Dawkins, Richard Dawkins falls into that category. Lawrence Krauss falls into that category. These are people who believe that if you believe in God, then you are a moron. I find that repugnant. Because I do not believe that science can answer that question. I do not believe that science can say that God exists or that God doesn't exist. I would say that those people are wrong. And the message that they're putting out that that we are insignificant or that we have no meaning or purpose because science says that we are made from, we are a cosmic accident. That's their opinion. That's a them problem. When they start making subjective comments as to or emotional evaluations of humanity's place, they put their PhD at the door. I have a PhD in astronomy. I don't remember a class that I took that said, "Oh yeah, if you believe this, then your moral character is this." Never had one of those classes. So when they spout off that nonsense, I don't agree with it. I do not like. Sorry, I'm getting a little emotionally charged. Neil deGrasse Tyson can go F himself. I do not like that man at all. I don't
definitely agree there.
Things. I don't like how he puts things. I mean, he said the entire field of philosophy is BS and should not be studied. He told a student he was wasting his time. So yeah, that's where I'm. So kind of coming back to it.
No,
when
that's
you put out like Krauss and all that, that's their opinion. That's not what science says. That's what certain scientists say, but not what science says.
Let's go more one, and then I got one more comment.
To that point, that was very well said, Robin. That was a great back and forth there. One of the things I've heard, and I'm not really a qualified astronomer, I don't know the history of astronomy, but to steelman the narrative that I've heard biblical cosmologists and sort of people that don't believe in the Copernican principle, whether that's Robert Bennett or Austin or various other people I've talked to. One of the things that they say is that the actual observations of the early 20th century astronomy cast doubt on the Copernican principle, and that as a result, constructs like dark matter and energy and some aspects of modern cosmology were created, perhaps still based on the data, but there was a heavy philosophical element to why things were constructed in that way. I'd like to get your thoughts first. Well, I guess you just spoke first, Rob.
Yeah.
So if I could put that question to Joe first, and then if Joe, if I didn't summarize the position correctly, let me know, and then perhaps Dr. Parks, you could respond.
Yeah, well, I mean, personally, I think everything at its core is philosophical. Personally, like I don't think there's any way to pull that out completely, just in my personal opinion. But as far as what other men held as philosophical bias or otherwise, I don't equate that to science either. That's more speculation. That's us trying to implement what we think somebody else was thinking, and I try to stay away from that. But I mean, you can look at certain quotes like from Hubble, where he I don't remember the exact quote, but he's like, it's unthinkable, and the only reason that we would adhere to that would be to save the phenomena. I forget the exact quote, but something, and it was along the lines of when he was studying redshift and blue shift. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, as far as what those men thought philosophically, I don't know. I never met those men. I can say what people have implied. I try not to do that because, again, we're speculating. They could have had a much broader, I'll use this example. People try to summarize me based off of videos they've seen on YouTube, and they've never met me in real life, never sat down and had a conversation with me. And I think that's really a plague on us as humanity to see that kind of thing happen. So I try not to do that with men of the past, no matter how intelligent they were revered to be. I just try to stick to what can I show and demonstrate through observations, tests, experiments, and then have as little special pleading as possible involved in all of that. That's just kind of where I like to stay with it.
So I kind of want to go back to that, the idea of special pleading, because as I've stated, I don't understand how gravity is special pleading, because it has been established as something that we can predict very, very accurately, at least particularly in a terrestrial sense. But going to those quotes, and yeah, I think Lucky put it in there, is that Hubble, for those of you who are not aware, Hubble's observations in 1929 showed that the universe was showed that galaxies, the velocity of those galaxies was moving away from us at a linear relationship with distance. Things that are farther away are moving away from us faster than things that are closer together. The only real explanation that makes sense with that scenario is that the universe is expanding as seen by us. Hubble apparently had a problem with that, because Hubble interpreted that as stating that the Earth must therefore be the center of all things because it is expanding away from us. But you can show that where Hubble was wrong in his thinking with simply a rubber band and a few paper clips. Is if the universe is expanding as it has been described to expand, then you would see the same kind of expansion no matter where you are in the universe. If you were on the Earth, you would see the expansion out seemingly from us. If you're on Jupiter, you'd see the same thing. If you're Andromeda, you would see the same thing. I don't put. I have been very adamant about what I consider to be quote mining. I don't care what Einstein personally had to say about things. I don't care what George Ellis personally had to say about things. I only care what the science has to say. What's funny to me is that, people don't like Newton. Well, Newton believed in God. He very much believed in God. Kepler believed in God, very much so. One of the reasons why he loved the laws of physics so well is because he thought that he was understanding God's creation, that God was sending him information about how the universe was created through the harmony of spheres. So, yeah, I could care less as to what someone has to say about the meaning of a particular model or what have you. I just care about the data and what the evidence shows me.
Okay, great. Thanks so much for that back and forth. Mr. Bear, do you have another question here, or I could jump in? I have another one that I'd like to get to. Getting to one of the points of the title, unless you had something you wanted to bring in response to that back and forth.
I had a pending comment, and I didn't want to derail, but you know how we were talking about the sky clock and time, basically. I know that the luminaries are set, or at least scriptures say that they're to show man when like the signs and seasons are.
Genesis 1:14.
Isn't it true that man created time, like the construct of 60 seconds? We made that up. And so if we're saying the clock is broken, well, how are we saying that? Because in my opinion, mankind experiences change. They don't experience time. Like we have the wristwatch and the iPhone that shows the tick, 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 tick. But really in a daytime, like in the day, the reality of our existence is I walk into this room and this changes and I move over there and that changes. So I don't know. I just don't want to lose the idea of, and we don't have to stay on like there's a great deceiver, but it seems to me that the creator made it perfect. And I don't know, there's something about like the pyramids with the stars that line up above them that do that again and again and again, and the cyclical nature of the heavens that repeat annually, I think. And if we lived in a heliocentric model, I think that it would be a little bit more spaghetti looking if you do time lapse of the night sky. And maybe that's a flat earth, like, oh, that's stupid, not what it would be. But like the whole idea, I mean, there's a few different ideas of the motions they tell us with the wobbles and the 3 different motions, and how does that all work? That I used to like. That's the thing about me, guys. I used to be full bore. We live on a spinning Earth that orbits the sun, and actually, I had married an expansive, massive, trillions of light year universe. I've married that idea to a strong, bigger than you can imagine creator God. And so for me to walk away from the grand size of the universe, it confused me for a while, because if it is closer, like Joe's saying, like if I have the truth, or if Joe has the truth, that it's a literal firmament above us, and the heavenly luminaries are much closer, like if the sun and the moon are smaller than the earth because they're closer, and if we can't get high enough to even see the whole of creation, like you can't even back up, like if there's a superfluid layer, you can't even go higher, or a firmament, you can't even go higher, and we can't see it all, that's a big deal to me. Like, I want to know if that's true or not, because we've seen a lot of stuff from NASA, and the video of like the funny thing on the way to the moon, when they faked in the little ship, they faked the everything. It's like, that bothers me, and it kind of got me on this track of like, what is actually going on. So yeah, I didn't want to derail, didn't mean to derail. I actually brought up signs and seasons and time and change, and is it a clock or not? But y'all can just move on. I just wanted to say that.
Can I touch on that real quick?
Yeah.
I would also like to touch on that.
Yeah, y'all can bounce them and then go back to Mord one, because he's holding it down. But I have all these thoughts.
This is that kind of sparked this train of thought in me just now. Just like Miss Rob was saying earlier. Rob Parks? How do you?
Rob works for me.
Okay. Like he was saying earlier, that just because we're in a heliocentric model and it's this huge thing doesn't mean that we're not special. Well, I think kind of on our side, what we see is, well, we're trapped in a fishbowl, so therefore we're in prison. It's kind of an alternate mentality to that mentality. And I disagree with that. I think from just being in the air and flying and looking at the size of this realm, like, it is massive, like, to an extent to where I don't think we can truly measure it. So that's why when I say, yes, I try to model things out, but I don't think we should cling to a specific model unless, like, it can, I guess, give us a theory for everything. So, and I don't think we have that yet. I don't think the heliocentric model does that, barycentric, whatever people want to say. I don't think anybody on the flat Earth side has produced anything like that yet. I think I'm working towards kind of a theory of everything, but it's going to be a long time before I get there. There's a lot. I think everybody in this room would agree that you're never going to have all the answers right away. It takes a lot of time, a lot of testing, a lot of setbacks, a lot of growth, failure, that kind of thing to really progress in your thinking and your studies and your understanding of not only science, but observed reality and the scientific method as well. So yeah, that's one thing that I see from both sides. Like, it seems like the flat earthers want a lot of times, flat earthers, atheists, agnostics want to say, well, we're not special because we're this little tiny blue dot floating in this massive universe. And then you have the other side, well, if we're trapped in a container, then we're just prisoners and God is evil and that kind of thing. I don't see it that way. Like, I see it as beautiful. And this is coming from somebody who was in the closet about flat earth for many, many years. And I was still debating through the heliocentric mindset during the time that I was in the closet about flat earth, like when I would debate people and have discussions about creation and faith and that kind of thing. So I just wanted to add that.
So appreciate that. And yeah, I actually never heard anyone in the flat earth side or anyone say that God was evil because of the flat earth of containing us like an ant farm.
I actually have heard it.
I have not heard that. That's I don't doubt you. I just haven't heard it. So, but going back to Boston, in that, so yes, you're correct. We basically have come up with a system of marking time, primarily the Babylonian. We have the Babylonians to thank for 360 degrees marked out by 60 segments, yada yada yada. But the thing is, that doesn't mean that time is a existence or a construction of man. The timing system is a construction of man. So if you come up with if someone else decided they come up with another timing system, you'd still run into the same effects. For example, you were saying that the stars above Giza or what have you, that's actually not true, because we go back to, you were talking about April 1st being the start of the new year.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that Hipparchus was able to see that the vernal equinox, the start of spring, changes constantly over a cycle of 26,000 years, the cycle of precession. So I agree that we do live in this cyclic universe, and when I was growing up, I took that very much to heart. I still want to believe. My personal worldview is that the universe will come to an end and be reborn at some point. But that's solely my worldview. That is not bared out by the science at this point. Actually, kind of the opposite of that. But, so I wanted to touch on that with the fact that timing systems are a creation of man, whereas time itself is God's. Then you were talking about the moon landing and all that. So, you were talking about being able to see down onto the Earth. Well, obviously I'm going to come back with, we have those. We have pictures of the Earth from space.
Right.
We have a picture of the Earth from the moon. So, and then you pointed to a funny thing happened on the way to the moon, where, things were faked or whatever. All of these instances where things have been faked have been debunked by other people. Dave McKeegan is a wonderful channel if you're looking for that sort of thing. So my question to you would be, why do you believe the documentary and not Dave McKeegan?
Well, it's not just the documentary. I guess if you're asking me, why do I believe what I do currently about flat Earth, it's a 3-year process of seeking the truth and the dot connecting, where you talk to different people at different times in different places that are all seeking the truth. It's almost like you're running a race as hard as you can. And at first you're not even looking, you're just going as hard as you can. And then you start looking to the left and looking to the right, and you see next to you real ones that aren't in this for money or for fame. You know what I mean? Not in it to get a big YouTube channel, but people that are fed up with what they would say are lies or deception. And I mean, the fact that I befriended a F-15 pilot that has observations and technology that he's broken down to me with radar, where he's like, the ground runs level, the sky runs level, parallel to each other. But just because they converge in the distance and make the horizon doesn't mean that that's actually what's going on, like the railroad track thing. And then, I've gotten to know Dr. Steve Young. I mean, he has a PhD, and I don't want to be like appeal to credentials, but PhD in nuclear theoretical physics. And he's realized, wait a minute, the heliocentric model is ridiculous, but he was in the field deeply. So whenever I meet these different people, it's not just like, why am I not listening to Dave McKeegan? Why am I looking at this one documentary? It's not that. It's I'm a human being that's super hungry for the actual truth of what's going on, because I don't want to be deceived, because I think that there's even greater deceptions that are going to be coming soon. I fell for the trap 4 years ago, or whatever that whole thing was. Like, I totally did that, and I wish I hadn't. And now I'm detoxing and I'm eating better and cleaner. And so my whole reason for being here is not to be right about flat Earth or like push it in globe believers' faces that I've got something that they don't have. It's to find out what is really going on. And I don't know. I mean, I want to ask Joe. I want you to have a response though, but I do want to ask Joe how high he thinks we can even get to see, because if there is a superfluid layer, and if the sun and the moon are actually excitation of energy in that superfluid layer, that's amazing. And if that's the truth, I want it. If it's not, I don't. And that's just where I'm at. I'm just an honest person. People get mad at me for just saying like, oh, that's conjecture. What are you talking about? You're a lunatic. No, I'm not. I'm a stay-at-home dad that loves my wife well. I'm faithful to her, and I'm raising babies. And I just want to tell my babies what's for real, not what I was told when I was 4 years old, or what's in your, in your PhD books. Now, I don't have anything against you at all as a person. Like, that's why I wanted to bring us together is, I don't know who's right. Are you right? Am I right? I don't know. I know that the Creator is loving and good, And I do think that there's going to be a new beginning. I don't think this evil is going to prevail forever. But anyway, I ran it a bit, kind of lost track of what I was even saying, but I hope that made sense. And
I just have one quick response I wanted to bring in, and particularly from the side of, I think, so I'm sort of more a theist-leaning agnostic, in the sense that I don't have a personal experience of God or a personal experience of religion, but I do find it odd that the way that the universe and the solar system have happened to have created this place for us to live, and I think that there's something to that. But I guess as far as like from a theological point of view, what I hear from a lot of flat earthers is that there's this deception about the nature of reality, and in particular with examples of like measurements of the globe, measurements of the Earth's spin, things like stellar aberration. They would tend to say that there's like a deception as to the true nature of those phenomena, and if God does not deceive, which would seem to be the case, then I guess the question I would put to you is Satan capable of deception about the nature of reality? Would God allow that? And if not, does that maybe cast doubt in your mind on the ability of any force to conceal the nature of God's creation from us?
that's a really good question. And my response to you would be, we'd have to take it back to the beginning, and I mean the very beginning, because I believe there was a point in time when nothing existed but Yah, or God. I like to say Yah, Yahweh, him in spirit form. I even believe, and this makes some people triggered, that his son was brought forth from his essence before anything was created. So I think that the Father and the Son, either the Father gave Jesus authority to create by the word of his mouth, or they co-created. I don't really know. Everything, materials, the world, the universe, everything that we call reality. And I think in the beginning, his intentions were not for us to be sick or die or have evil around at all. I believe it was perfect. I believe we were going to live forever. I believe the biblical story of the pre-fall state of man. But he didn't want robots when he created us. He didn't want just people just, obeying and loving him and just going about that, because that's not his creation having a choice to love him or be faithful to him. And so I do believe that there was one tiny choice of, don't eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Don't do that. It's all you got. You can eat anything you want. You can enjoy your wife. I made Eve for you, a helpmate, and I think it was awesome. So anyway, what I'm getting at is, we see a sunset and we think it's beautiful. We see it, we eat a steak and it tastes really good. Or we have a stream like this that's freaking awesome. Nobody's like down each other's throat. This is still just a very, very fractured version of what it actually, God's intention was for us. The connection, like we should have brotherly love that we can't even explain. And I think it's going to get back to that. I think it's going to get restored. So I think above the firmament is the New Jerusalem, a 1,500-mile cube city, physically there, that's going to come down, and we'll be seeing it in the sky. I think there'll be an earthquake to level the ground, get it ready for New Jerusalem to set down. And I think that the saints are going to reside in New Jerusalem, literally with Jesus, Yeshua. And then if you think about this 1,500-mile cube city, I think that's real. If you sit it on a globe, all four corners would just be hanging up off the side by like 120 miles. But on a flat earth, it just sets down in the center and everybody comes to the middle to congregate. Now, if everything I just said is nonsense, and if it's a made-up story, if the Bible and that whole thing I just said is not true, I am not scared that I'm wrong. If Christianity and if pursuing the Father and his Son isn't the truth, I'll figure it out. Eventually, when I die, I'll go, oh, holy smokes, I believed in Christianity. Wow. It caused me to love my fellow man and not hurt other people. It got me away from porn and just debauchery and darkness and anxiety. And I was all kinds of jacked up. And when I found the Messiah, I got on a path where I wanted to heal and become whole and find people, I'd say like you guys, because I don't think you hurt it. I don't think any of you hurt anybody intentionally, but there are people out there like that. And that those people out there that have the ability to hurt children or hurt anybody else, that was never the Creator's intention, but it was like a downward spiral of we did that. We walked away from the first and only commandment. And then now we're in a state. See, and I'll land the plane here. Too many times human beings look at this very moment we're in, and that they take it like this is permanent, or God's bad, and how could all this horrible stuff happen? Well, I think that we brought this on, but he has a plan for redemption. I think it is through Yeshua. And that's just kind of the life I'm living out for 15 years. But yeah, man, I said a lot. I don't even know if it made sense to you, but I love you as a person, as a friend, as a brother. And I'm in this for truth. I'm not fake. I hope to be transparent. And I hope that what I just said brought glory to the Creator of this place, because it's not about me. I don't care if I get accolades or if I'm right, even before you guys or before him. I just want to find the truth because I think it's valuable, and I think it's been stolen from us many, many times in many different categories. But anyway, there's an answer, I think. Sorry, man. Sorry.
Can I give a quick answer to that?
Yeah, let's go all the way around. There's Joe, and then we'll go Mordwan and then Professor Parks for any kind of rebuttal, response, thoughts. Yeah, go for it, Joe.
So I would just say, yeah, I mean, if you look at what is a creator, he must create to be a creator. So it's in his very nature to create. So he had no choice. Like, he had to create because he is the creator. Like, it's just a byproduct of him being the creator. So, but in doing so, he has to give his creation free will, all of it. And that would include Satan, who tempted Eve in the garden with the same lie that he uses and has used throughout history. And that is, did God really say? He attacks God at his word and always has. So for me, when I look at the scriptures and God says, you know, the earth is immovable, its own foundations, the fountains of the deep are beneath it, the bottomless pit is beneath it, Sheol is beneath it, Abraham's bosom is beneath it, the great abyss is beneath it, the throne is above it, that he descended and ascended. You know, there's an up and there's a down, that there's these heavenly bodies, there's the earth, and then there's this whole underworld beneath us. Like, so, you know, he says all these things. He says that the sun and moon were stopped over specific lands, that the sun and moon were stopped. He talks about how the firmament separates the waters above from the waters beneath, that it's a tent for the sun and the moon, and that the sun and the moon were created on the fourth day, that light was created on the first day, the firmament on the second day. He says that it takes shape like like clay under a signet, that the sky is like a molten looking glass, or a bronze metal mirror that reflects heat, or a cast metal mirror. 3 different translations for Job 37:18. There's just all these very descriptive language used about his creation in his word. So for me, it's like, why would he be so descriptive to then turn around and say, well, I know I described it like it was flat, but what I really meant is it's a tilted, wobbling, spinning, corkscrewing, water-covered space pear. So that's just kind of where I stand with it. But yeah, I mean, God, one, he has to create because he is creator. It's part of his nature. To be a loving God that wants to be intimate with us and have a connection with us, he has to give us free will and allow us to choose that. Otherwise, he's a dictator and that created robots. And that applies to all of his creation. So the angels that he created that decided to turn their backs on him do have the ability to manipulate and mislead the masses, just like we have the ability to manipulate and mislead people. We all have that free will. So that's kind of my response to that.
Thanks. Mordwan or Professor Parks?
To Mordwan.
Okay, yeah.
I'll let Dr. Parks respond.
Okay.
If he responds.
So, yeah, free will is pinnacle to my faith. If someone asked me, could science ever make you no longer believe in God? And the answer to that question is yes. If you can scientifically demonstrate to me that free will isn't a thing, then I will question my my worldview. But until then, no. So yeah, fully on board with the fact that free will is vital to, or not vital, is paramount to the whole thing. It is why it is through our choices that we either love God or we destroy God's creation. Now, I will quibble a little bit. You said that God must create. That is imposing a limit on God. I won't say, I would not, but I think I catch your meaning. God is a creator. That's one aspect of an infinite God. And so as a creator, he's going to create. But again, that's a little minor quibble. But when it comes to, so I'm sure he's going to love me advertising this. This is Taking Back Astronomy by Jason Lisle. This is a PhD astronomer who did his research thesis on basically figuring out how the sun works. And I got that because I was stunned that someone like him would be a creationist, because creationism, from my understanding, claims that the Earth is thousands of years old. I think he makes the claim that it's about 10,000 years old. Whereas if you study how the sun works, it can only be billions of years old. So that's what got me on this. But he takes the route that I think that Austin is taking with the TFE, is that God just made it looks that way. You know, the reason why stars appear billions or thousands of light years away is because God made it look that way. I wholeheartedly reject that notion, because that would require that God, two possibilities. One, God is lying to me. God is giving me data that does not represent reality. I cannot accept that. Or two, that Satan is lying to me. And I can't accept that, because that would mean that God would allow it. And that has nothing to do with human nature. That has nothing to do with human choice. So the idea that God would allow a deceiver to deceive, to me, kind of goes back to point A, is God himself would then have to be a deceiver if he allows Satan to deceive us. When it comes to this deception question, I take this actually rather personally, because one of the things that because of my identity as a science communicator, as an educator, and I've asked this of numerous people, is that I will tell you that we live in a heliocentric solar system. That is characterized by what is called the Nice model. We have a cold, dark matter universe that is approximately 13.7 billion years old. I will tell you that is strong. That is the model that is strongest, or that has the most support. But Lucky in the chat has accused me of doublespeak, of gibberish. He has accused me of, I don't know if he's used the word deceitful, but if what I'm telling you is, if I tell you these things and you don't agree with it, then either I'm wrong, and if so, I would like to be shown that quantitatively. Going back to the electrostatic thing, if you can use this law of electrostatics and show that things accelerate at 9.8 meters per second in the absence of all other forces, I will listen to you. I will look at that work. So either I'm wrong, I am self-deceiving, which means that I am pathological. I would, unless you can give me an official diagnosis of that, I'm going to reject that as well. Or I am deliberately lying to you. Or I guess you could say that I think has been softly suggested that I am simply regurgitating what I have learned, and so I have been lied to, and I have simply just accepted that lie and is passing it along. But the thing is, I've done the work. I have made observations. I have taken data, and this data is not reconcilable with a flat Earth. So, particularly, certainly not reconcilable with a firmament. I am a part of a NASA project now that is quite literally putting a satellite into orbit. So the idea that a firmament exists, you're going to have to explain to me why we got $20 million to fake a satellite that can't possibly work, because I'm going to be able to see it being created. And I can tell you that it's not going to be a balloon, that this thing is going to be a satellite deployed on a rocket. So, so that's my position on the whole deception concept is, if this is a deception, then I must be a deceiver. And, I kind of take issue with that. I do not wish to be a deceiver by any stretch of the imagination. I think deception of other people is morally wrong, because it does not allow the true application of will. If you don't have good factual information, then you can't be held responsible, or it's problematic to hold you responsible for actions that you have based on given knowledge. So if I'm deceiving people, then I am, in my mind, taking away from their free will, which, as I've stated, is paramount to my belief in God.
And that was well said. Mordwan, do you have a comment or something to add? Because I have a comment if you don't.
Yeah, I guess one of the other things that I've heard, and I'm not trying to strawman anyone, but this is just based on conversations I've had in the past, would be to say that, yes, maybe there are dishonest people that know the truth and have some level of complicity in being dishonest. But let me give you a specific practical example from some of the stuff that Alan has been saying recently, which would suggest, for example, that, it's not that surveyors are deceptive about the sort of derivation of the Earth's shape originally from like astrogeodetic measurements. It's that there's some other phenomena that is making those measurements appear to match the globe, when in reality it actually contains it actually is measurements of a flat area. And I'll let you respond, but in the interest, because I think you had a response around Boston Bear, but in the interest of the original topic of the conversation tonight, and I will need to go in about 20 minutes or so, unfortunately, because I've been highly enjoying this. This has been an excellent conversation by everyone. But what I would like to close on, if we can, once we get your response, is this idea that of celestial geometry, which I think really pertains to Joe's work, and whether it's even geometrically or physically possible for such a phenomena to occur that would make the realm that we live in appear a way that it isn't.
Yeah, that's good. I need to ask a quick question that might be a cliffhanger. Do you guys need 2 minutes? I have a little queued up Northern Lights video for 2 minutes if anyone needs a bathroom break. I do. It's been an hour 32. So let me do that real quick. Get a drink, hop up. We're going to come back to Mordwan's question. I wrote down my response, so we'll go to you first. So I'll see y'all in just a couple, maybe 60 seconds or less. Is that cool?
Peace out.
All right, here we go. Let's do this. How do I pin it? Let's do, oh yeah, play. There we go. And then hide. All right. Pretty quick. Yeah, I've been training a lot, and
And it's from Ireland.
You gotta drink a lot of water when you're running and stuff. I had a great workout today. But anyway, yeah, I think we have 20 minutes left. This has been fascinating. I mean, fun. This is the kind of stuff that I want to watch on YouTube, is people not fighting, but just talking about some different things.
Yeah, same. I would love to do that on my channel. I've said, if you believe the Earth is flat, please come on my channel, have a conversation, because again, I'm very interested in knowing why you hold the contrary view to myself. So
yeah, wait on Mord One, and we'll pick it up where he left off, because that was great. And should be a couple seconds in chat. Thanks for. I haven't really looked. I've been impressed with you, Professor Parks, being able to like see what other people are saying, because I've got to just keep my mind basically on the camera right here, and your faces, and what are we saying? And I do take a couple notes so I don't lose track. But if I tried to read the chat too, I think I'd be like, "What'd you say?" I'd be like, and that's happened to me before. But yeah, I do appreciate people.
I really respect you a lot for the fact that you're just not, name calling and degrading. And
of course,
and the many years I've been doing this, that's generally what I encounter with a lot of the discussions, and I just have to walk away from those discussions. And in the past, I've been guilty of letting my emotions get the better of me, so I try not to do that anymore.
We're all children of Christ, and I love all children of Christ, so I don't understand why I would want to be mean to you or to call you out or to be insulting to you. I mean, obviously I'm a human being, so therefore fallible. And if you attack me, I'm going to probably attack back. But yeah, I mean, we're here. My opinion of it, with my faith, what is principle for me is that I believe that our purpose really is to bring about the kingdom of heaven on earth as much as we can. And so in order to do that, we have to live like Christ lived. And as far as I know, Christ didn't call the Romans, D-bags. So he was very chill, and he spoke with anybody. So anyway.
Yeah, I agree. He actually told us to not speak ill of other people, to speak blessings, to use our voice for power in a good way and not in a negative way. I agree with that 100%.
All right, to pick it back up, Mordwan had proposed celestial mathematics, and Joe, you looking into the heavens, and was the question basically, how could it be that, is it an optics question about how could we be tricked that it's a globe but we live on a flat plane?
Yeah. We could scope it either way. I mean, we could talk from my perspective. I'm not a physicist, right? I'm not an expert in refraction or any sort of like optical phenomena of that nature. But what I do know is geometry, right? And so, to my mind, if the claim is not that it is a deception by everyone, but rather that it is a deception of phenomena, that there's some phenomena that causes the light to move in a certain way, so that we see things in a way that appear to match observations from a spherical surface, when in reality what we're seeing is a spherical sky above a flat surface that is sort of seen in two hemispheres. And so I'm just curious, of what Joe and Dr. Parks would have to say about that, because to my mind, from a geometry point of view, that's not possible. But yeah, I would love to hear responses from the panel in that regard to kind of close things out for me.
Yeah. Well, I would say, like, I could pull up the quotes, but I don't have them handy, and I'm new to this whole kind of podcast thing, so sharing screen and all that, and I'm not that great at that yet. Run Boston Bears actually helped me with some of that so far. So
I could pull up
I would say that, like, even in some of the quotes from prior men of science, Einstein being one, that the coordinate system can work both ways. Like, if you just look at it from purely a mathematics standpoint, that you can account for the movement of the heavenly bodies, whether the Earth is at the center or not. So for me, it's not a problem. What I think is a problem is, I think that billions of light years is a problem. I think that seeing things millions, trillions, billions of light years away is something we can't even fathom to begin with. And then I would also say that, and I think Dr. Parks would probably agree with this, that the argument of optics and light has really been at the forefront of science since the beginning of science. And even still to this day, we're trying to figure it out completely. So when it comes to understanding how we're seeing how light works, when we take it from an affirming the consequent kind of perspective of, well, we've always been taught it's a sphere, and this seems to only work on a sphere, therefore it's a sphere. And then that puts us in kind of an in the box type of thinking that doesn't allow us to look for any other possibilities. So then instead of being able to falsify that, we have to put band-aids on it constantly, I guess is a simple way of putting it. And I would attribute some of those band-aids, like the three-body problem, the horizon problem, the flatness problem, dark matter, dark energy, all these different things. So that's just, I guess that would be my response to that.
Okay, great. Dr. Parks, did you have a response? And I'm sorry, my internet is very poor at the moment. So,
hey, no worries. So, yeah, I've heard Alan's sort of approach to this, and he definitely takes more of a rhetorical approach, like confirming the antecedent and all that. And I'm not an expert in any of that. My expertise lies in data, in the analyzing of data using physical law. And so, where should I start with this? Actually, let me ask the question of you. And I've heard this claim before. It's unfathomable that that the stars are so far away. Why?
Well, I just think that there is such thing as the attenuation of light. I can only see so far. A telescope, in my opinion, now that I actually have some experience using astronomy rigs, is that the telescope is not some magical device. It's a tube with glass, or a tube with glass and mirrors. So it's not allowing us to see billions of light years away. And there's several reasons why I would say that. But mainly it's just like light attenuates. We know this. Light needs a medium and a charge to it. It needs a container, a medium, and a charge to exist. I don't feel like the vastness of a near perfect vacuum gives a good explanation for that. And I could go on to many other reasons, but I'll just keep it short with that. Okay.
I can't remember the phrase you used for gravity, all like appealing to something, or I don't know. To me, that's what ether is. Is this argument that light needs a
concreteness?
Yeah, that light needs a medium through which to propagate. Science does not support that. Light travels through vacuum. There is no ether there. If you are to say that there ether is there, is basically a circular argument. You first have to say that light must have a medium through which to propagate. So therefore, if light is propagating, there must be a medium there. But no other observations demonstrate that there is a physical media there. And we've looked all over the place. In terms of attenuation of light, fully agree. Light attenuates at inverse square law. But you have to understand the sheer amount of energy being put off by a star, the sheer amount of light that is starting off to be attenuated. You're talking about telescopes. Do you have telescopes of different apertures?
Yes.
What I'd like you to do is to go look at an area with a small telescope, and then look at that same spot with a larger telescope.
I've done that.
Have you not seen more stars in the larger telescope than the smaller one?
I would argue that is dependent on several variables, which I'm sure you would agree, just, different conditions and things like that. But with the smaller scope, if I have a wider field of view and the right camera setup, I might actually see more stars than.
Oh no, I'm talking about the exact same area, the exact same field of view. If you're looking at exact same field of view with a large aperture telescope and a smaller aperture telescope, if you find that you do not see darker or more stars in the larger aperture, then yeah, I would say that you're in a severely light polluted area. But I mean, even if you look up at the sky, you see a smattering of stars. But as soon as you magnify it in some way, you see stars there that you can't see visually. So the fact that you can't see them doesn't mean the light is attenuating to zero. It just means that our eyes are not large enough in order to capture enough light to actually register. And so that's why we continually build bigger and bigger telescope, is to collect more and more light. In order for things to attenuate, you look down, look across the lake and you don't see anything or what have you, that is a different effect. That is because there is a medium there, and that is because there is material which is literally attenuating the light, either absorbing it or scattering it. We see this in astronomy too. Galaxies or nebulae, for example, are, in my field, my study of young stellar objects, I can't look at them visually. I have to look at them in the infrared because visible light doesn't penetrate the dust, whereas infrared light does. And so, where was I going with that? So this notion that the light just can't get to us, I don't see any physical reason why it shouldn't be able to get to us, given the amount of energy that is being produced and given the distances that that we say they are, or where the observations tell us they are.
Hey, we have a special guest, Alan from Space Audits, popped in. Do you mind if I bring him up, Professor Parks and Joe and Mordwan?
You're right.
All right. Welcome, brother. You have
What's up, Alan?
Some great
Hola,
things
amigos.
contribute.
Oh, yeah, Allie.
It's been a party,
Yo.
man.
So, Alan,
What's up?
I said it's been a party.
Sorry.
Welcome.
Yeah, it's been a good talk. Alan, so I had just hopefully done a good steelman of your position on, and let me state it again and then correct me if I'm not stating it correct. But to my mind, your position on astronomical and astrogeodetic observations as taken from Earth is not that there is per se deception necessarily, although there may be some level of that, but rather that the phenomena of light act in such a way that we have apparent curvature of the Earth that's really due to aspects of the celestial sphere and the heavens. Is that a fair statement of your position?
We can't hear you.
Muted.
You're on mute.
Testing. Can you hear me
You
now?
got it.
Yeah.
So how we perceive the celestial sphere gives us the apparent positions of objects. I think that we all see the sky in our own localized dome of vision, and that's what creates the position overlap. Now, when they go and take measurements of the stars, there is no idealized position. They deviate plus or minus a few arc seconds over the course of a year, and they make corrections to the almanac, every year about that, and you'll see that they go, back and forth. So there's no idealized position or whatever for them, and I think that's just how it is. But they do correspond to positions on the ground. I actually came across something really interesting called a celestial theodolite that I want to show you guys. It's brand new, fresh off the Flat Earth Press. But before we get to that, I heard you guys talking about ether and the philosophy of that, and I really wanted to touch on that before we get to geometric celestial sphere optics and stuff. So you were saying that science doesn't support ether and the vacuum and you were saying if they were looking for it, you looked everywhere and you can't seem to find it. Well, that's so funny because the history of interferometry, they were looking for Earth's orbital velocity and they could never find it either, and they had to swap one of those out. Go ahead. What's up?
Orbital velocity relative to the ether. That is a key distinction.
Yeah,
that is
and you
often left out.
Fair enough. And you want to know what they measured?
Nothing, basically.
No,
it was zero based on the precision.
So do you know how an interferometer reads velocity components? Okay, so the distance in the fringes is proportional to the square of the velocity, right?
Yeah.
So Michelson and Morley measured 5 to 6 kilometers a second in a basement at 200 feet above sea level. Right now, from that data set alone, we can be like, okay, well, round it to 0, or maybe or maybe it was nothing, right? But they did get a velocity reading. Now their air margin was 2 kilometers a second, so they're above their air margin, and they have an actual velocity component here, right? That corresponds to something according to fringes, as experimentally verified by Fazal when he was doing Fresnel drag, right? So they knew they could measure velocity with this ratio.
But what is the error distribution of the error margin?
Actually, that's what I was going to point out. From my understanding of that experiment, is that the data was not statistically significantly larger than the error bars, and if that is the case, then you cannot say that is a real signal. That is more than likely coming from some kind of systematic error in your instrument, because no instrument is perfect.
So I could see why you would think that, but that's why they were also repeated by Dade Miller and other people who have measured the exact same thing. But before we get to those lads, there was Michelson and Morley did more measurements than just what was presented. But what we have that's publicly presented to us, if you analyze that, I have a guy named Alexander Consalzi or something like that, some Italian guy. Anyway, he did his own harmonic analysis of the data set, and he finds that he has like sigma 3 confidence, and 3 of the measurements as presenting as statistically significant for the readings, they are over the error margin. So I can show you guys that if you guys want to look at that. But the measurements were repeated throughout history by other people and at different altitudes, and show the same correlation that this is a sidereal measurement. And when you have a closed loop interferometer, that one measures sidereal rotation, so it measures the same fluctuation peaks. So I don't see the point in like trying to deny that a right angle interferometer measures a different thing than a closed loop one. Even if you wanted to disagree on the magnitude of the velocity, like sure, but clearly the periodicity is there, because that's what they measure.
So I really don't want to get into the weeds of this, because it's been an hour. I've been here for an hour and 50 minutes.
You're good. Yeah, you're good. I'm coming in.
I agree with you in that. Yes, there are these observations. What if we had time? I would ask, do the observations from these various people agree with one another, or do they simply just show a velocity relative to a medium? Because that is vital. The observations have to agree with one another.
Yeah,
in addition to be there. So, but again, that's getting into the weeds of it. What I can say is that we have been doing astronomy just fine without the need for ether. There is no particular. Let's look at and I know we're going to get into dark matter or dark energy and all that. Just look at the solar system. The solar system can be looked at classically. It has no dark matter, has no dark energy. It works as a heliocentric model. We know where things are going to be anywhere at any time,
right?
Basically.
But that's just kinematics. So you don't need a causal mechanism for that. You just need a ratio of pi and a periodicity to give you the distance relationship from that. So that's not necessarily physically meaningful. There's no mutual exclusivity in that. But in fact, if you were to get back to interferometry, you would have to substantiate the velocity component of Earth to make the heliocentric model even viable at that point, because otherwise it's just kinematics.
So, go ahead.
I was going to say, I was also going to say I wouldn't invoke dark matter or anything either, because that's dynamic causes where you're trying to assert mass where there isn't one, so you could have the mutually exclusive claim of explaining the sky. I wouldn't do that in my cosmology, but you certainly could do that with ether variables, no problem, because that's just math and you're filling in blanks essentially, right? So it's not really, it wouldn't be, I don't consider anything applied to the sky, I consider all kinematics. So when people are because there's no orbital velocity for Earth, I don't think that Einstein and Newtonian dynamics mean anything.
Okay.
Well, let me jump off of that, Alan, because this was kind of the conversation that we were having, and it was one of the main topics I wanted to get into. And I'm mindful of time because we've been on for almost 2 hours So thank you all very much for listening for so long, and for everyone that's been involved for a wonderful civil discussion, which is not always the case in these arenas. And I'm guilty of that as much as anyone else, obviously. But I guess my question when it comes to kinematics, and I think I put this to you before, Alan, but perhaps we could just end the panel with this last point. And certainly I have to leave after this one, but my perspective would be, and I think that Joe, you have tried to make, for example, two poles of rotation work over a flat surface. Alan, I think you've spoken to this before as well. That's a little bit more Shane's domain as it comes to the star stuff, right? But to my mind, there's a certain geometry, right? There's a geometric relationship between what we observe on the ground and what we observe in the heavens. And we can insert into that black box any physical cause mechanism purely from the perspective of kinematics. I'd like to frame this. How is it possible to define that mapping? And if we could close there, unless there's any other final questions.
How is it? I'm sorry. What was the question? It was how would you define kinematics?
So are you asking?
It's just movement over time? I don't understand.
So what I'm asking is, let's say we observe the stars moving, the celestial bodies moving as an ephemeris from an observer on the Earth, right? There's physics, there's optics, there's dynamics, there's all of that. But just the purely kinematic observation of the heavens defines a geometry between observer and that which is observed. And I'm just curious if...
Oh, yeah, I got you. Yep, I got you. So basically...
So if we could just go around, and, so I guess Alan start, and then we can kind of close out. And
yeah, I got you. I got you. So we have a radius of vision, right? So we see in a hemisphere. And can I screen share real quick? Because I want to read this citation real quick. That's really...
You should be able to.
Pertinent to this point. Cool. I'll just do entire screen. And then go to... presentations, Nully. What were we just talking about, lads? Celestial sphere, right? Got you. Right. Okay. So here we go. From 1892, Old and New Astronomy. So this quote here is really important because it talks about how we perceive the sky. Because you've been in the flight Earth scene a while now, Mort. So you're probably familiar with elevation angles to Polaris and that relationship not being mutually exclusive. Now, what would be mutually exclusive is where you go to take zenith measurements of the stars, and there's a deviation. If you expect them to be in a specific spot based off your calculations, then you would have an argument there. But in terms of angle displacement, that relationship that wouldn't be mutually exclusive. So let me read this quote here. And this aligns with curved visual space versus, parallel light rays coming in with, keeping it all Euclidean. So this is overhead is the dome of the heavens, which far from it has been determined by actual positions of visible bodies like the heavenly orbs, or by the blue sky, or by the clouds, has in no reality a definable shape, but which may be geometrically regarded as a hemisphere around a center. This is not indeed the natural idea of the observer, whom the dome of the heavens appears to have somewhat of a flattened form, the horizon being 3 times to 4 times away as the region overhead. In considering the cloudy sky, we remember that if we are to rightly understand what we see, the usual curved surface at which we look on it is much flatter than this. We mistakenly attribute the domed shape of the heavens, whereas in reality the curvature is no greater than the curvature of the Earth itself, which under ordinary conditions is imperceptible. So he's saying here, he's talking about the optical equivalence, right? And when you get into geographia, which is your
mic keeps going up and down, Alan.
Yeah, it's clipping. It's clipping a little bit.
1 second. Auto adjust mic value, dude. That's the bad man. That's what was doing it. Oh my god, dude. Days and days of that. Okay. Whew. All right. Sorry about that, lads. Okay, so anyway, there's an optical equivalence there. Like this is well known about, but they try to make it mutually exclusive to the sky. But so suppose we see, in this hemisphere, right? So we take the maximum dimensions of our reference star that we see, which would be Polaris, and we go as far as we can see before we can't see it anymore, and that would be to the equator, right? And then if you use units of measurement that are a ratio of the coordinate system itself that you're going to use to divvy up everything, or the distance of the displacement, if you break it up into 69 miles per degree, multiply that by 90 lines of latitude, uh, getting to the equator, that will give you 6218. And if you do a ratio of that, 1/10 millionth of that is what 1 meter is. So you can start to use that to calculate things out and use a coordinate system based on your hemisphere of vision. Now, when things go out of your hemisphere of vision, right, you would just map that on with negative functions, and that would be on the underside of it, right? You could say that it's going behind a ball curve, or you could say that it's at your optical limits, but the mapping functions would be the same. So you would go to the south and do the same thing with whatever reference point you would have down there, do it back to the equator, and you would try to make everything symmetrically as possible. So that would be the equivalence.
Professor Parks, did you want to respond to that?
I would need to look at the specifics of what you're using, but what it sounds to me is that you're backwards engineering things. If you're going to be using the 69 miles per degree or whatever, I'm fairly certain you're aware that that is based on a globe. We get that by treating the globe as a sphere. If you have it as flat, you don't have that relationship, or it's difficult to explain that. But mainly what I want to talk about is that celestial sphere. Is that astronomers, we use the celestial sphere. I have one over there, and we know that it's simply a geometric tool. We do not believe that it is in any way reality, in the sense that the stars are affixed to a sphere surrounding the Earth. We believe that that is simply a 2D representation of a 3D environment, and that sphere, that celestial sphere, is really just the projection of the Earth's latitude and longitude coordinates up onto the sphere. I've heard this idea of us having different, personal domes or what have you. In a sense, that is true, in that what you're talking about is a local horizontal system as defined by your position, longitude or altitude and azimuth. If you have two people in two different locations and you look at the same star, those two coordinates will not be in agreement with each other. So I don't know. I may have misheard you, but I thought you had implied that would actually be the case with the zenith measurements, but I'm not entirely certain about it. But
No. So the zenith measurements would be in a slightly different scenario, but we can go over that in a second. So the nautical mile is a ratio of a circle, and you're just using an arc of that. So you're taking 1/3600th of it, and you can define the distance of it by anything. And that's actually what they did until it was standardized by the Board of Longitude, and then they did like a reconvening meeting where they got together and to define like all units of measurements and weights and all that, and agreed upon the 69 mile relationship. But you could do it with 60 nautical miles. You can get the same exact thing. It all depends on the circumference of what you're defining it as for the ratio, and then anything would calculate out because you're just cosigning based off of the angle, and you set the altitude based off of the distance from the North Pole to the equator as your metric for defining, the deviation in the stars itself. So when you do all that, all your calculations would be fine. And actually in 1776, the King of England did a decree where he was like, hey, we need to establish this latitude and longitude system such that we can have corrections that it can be used for two parties to circumnavigate around Britain. And they were hiring mathematicians and astronomers to figure all of that out. None of this, these are like transformations, corrections, none of this is mutually exclusive to anything. I was specifically talking about for the zenith measurement corrections. This was in relation to geodetic surveying and how they, how they use latitude and longitude. To even begin to use it, you have to know the dimensions of the place before you can even do that. So that's kind of funny and really circular how they do that. But basically, when you calculate everything out and you cosine the stars, you'll get a distance computation out of that if you set the altitude because you have the angle. So the distance is just going to be a ratio of that following cosines. So they traverse the land, they look up, they take their zenith measurement, and they find that the stars are never quite in the center of the telescope. And the corrections that they came up with, that they said, okay, well, this must that's where they got the deflection, the vertical, the difference in the expected versus the measured. And they say, okay, well, that's due to the Earth being in an oblate spheroid, and here it's flatter, here it's more ellipsoidal. But all of these are just relating ground positions to the coordinate system and then explaining why there's a deviation. It doesn't have to have anything physically meaningful. And if you're available after you guys finish your questions, I want to show you guys the celestial theodolite. It's really cool.
All right. Well, I actually have to go because, ironically enough, I have to actually record a lecture on Kepler's laws.
No way.
So, couple things. That angle of 15 degrees, 69 miles, that is taken from the center of a sphere. So you can't take that measurement from a flat.
Is a radius mutually exclusive to a sphere? Or is it just to like you can have a circle, right? Or a sphere, like this, so an ellipsoid, a spheroid, and a blade spheroid, all these things are coordinate systems that if they share the same y-axis point, you can transform between them with a simple correction method. I just found a whole book on all the different types of projections in the
Well, I again, yes, you can. Hence why that map behind Joe, you can make that map is because you can make changes between different coordinate systems, and you can make certain adjustments so that things
shout out to bezel functions.
So yeah, but I don't want to get into that because that it's into more of a debate style thing. But
no, you're good.
So what I wanted to say though is what I'll end up with is we're talking about kinematics and dynamics. I guess is that you had stated that the motions of the planets are kinematics. This goes back to something that Joe mentioned before in terms of gravity. He mentioned that gravity could be explained through electrostatics. And my proposal to him and to anyone else is that if you look at the Galilean inclined plane experiment, you will get if you do that experiment, you will get and verify that the acceleration due to gravity at your location is approximately 9.8 meters per second squared. You can then take Newton's first law of gravitation, which is dynamics, it's a force, and you can then derive that you should also get that exact same acceleration at that exact same position. They match. One is kinematically determined, one is dynamically determined, and they match. Kepler's laws, and I will be doing a video on this. Yes, Kepler, when he determined them empirically. He determined them, I guess you could say, kinematically. But then, and he actually ascribed a force to it. He thought that it was actually magnetic. He knew that there was a force that fell off as the inverse square in order for equal areas and equal times to work out. But he attributed it to magnetism because the Earth's magnetic field had just been discovered. But when Newton came on and said, no, if I use my law of gravitation and I use my laws of motion, I can derive that the motions must be ellipsoidal or ellipses, that they sweep out equal areas in equal times. And if you look at Kepler's harmonic law, what you find is that Kepler could only look at the ratios between planets, whereas Newton's revision of Kepler's third law is universal. It's generalized to any two masses. And so just simply to dismiss the motion of the planets as simply kinematics is not true. They are dynamically determined, or there is a dynamical foundation for it. So,
Parks. Are you gonna cover how the mass in the equation GMM squared cancels out, and it's just a ratio of the constant again, and through the proportionality constant?
For Kepler, yes.
Here,
Kepler's law as written is a ratio.
Here, let me show you this, because what happens when you put the mass back in the equation, it doesn't change it at all. It doesn't matter. It changes it by 0.1%. So check this out. We got my screen sharing, JT.
Yeah, it's up.
All right, cool. So we got the old Kepler's laws, right? So we're starting with momentum here, and we're going to convert that into pi, so we can get our ratio over the periodicity and velocity
Those
and
are
all
not
that, right?
really that's not really momentum. Those was forces, but sure.
Right. I'm sorry. Centripetal. You're right. Absolutely. The centripetal force, because that's equal to gravity. So we're going to ratio all that out, right? So now we got pi to get our distances for speed and velocity. And it all turns out that, the periodicity squared is proportional to the semi-major axis cubed, which is very cool. And this turns out to be proportional to 4 pi squared over GM, right? Now, what this dude is saying here, when you add back in the mass here, like for the example here, he goes Jupiter and one of its moons. When you add the mass back into the equation to get like the dynamic prediction, right, it changes it by 0.1%. So it doesn't matter at all. Like this is why.
Now,
Yeah,
I am going to respond to that.
Mhm.
I must respond to that.
Mhm.
So if you could put up that graphic again.
Yes. Share entire screen.
If you go all the way up, the one in the box, no, go all the way up. The equation that is boxed right there, that is not Newton's revision of Kepler's third law. That is an approximation of that law. And the explanation for that is that the second M, in terms of the Galileans and Jupiter, the M is negligible, the moon's mass is negligible in terms of Jupiter's mass. And so your calculation is only going to be, 0.1% off, which is why you can use it in a approximate form in that instance. You can also use it in that instance if you're looking at Jupiter's motion with respect to Saturn or the sun. You can also make that approximation, but that does not nullify that law. And if you have two objects of equal mass, you cannot use that form. So that is not saying what you think it's saying.
Well, it is not going to change it significantly at all. I've had
If
people.
the masses are comparable, yes, it will.
Okay, so in the examples that you were saying, the solar system, for example, right? This is what we're trying to say was mutually exclusive. So none of this matters at all, and it's just kinematics. And to further substantiate it, would have been Michelson-Morley getting 30 kilometers a second.
That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that law, in its true form, which is the sum of the masses, that is dynamically determined. As you just showed, it's basically a derivation of forces. And so the reason why you can neglect that second M again is because the second M in that example is so much smaller than the mass of the sun, or with the Galilean moons, the mass of the moon with respect to Jupiter. But in its full glory, it's M plus M. And so if you have two masses that are comparable to each other, you cannot use that equation as you have shown it on the screen. It does not invalidate it in any way whatsoever.
You can cancel it out because it's algebra. And
no, you cannot do that if the masses are. That approximation only holds if mass 1 is much, much larger than mass 2. Nothing cancels out.
Well, you'll have to show me the limits of where it breaks. But for what you specifically were saying, like let's just look at the solar system. It's all kinematics.
As I said, you can derive that law through gravitation, which makes it not kinematics. It makes it dynamics.
Right. And if you had any experimental verification of the dynamics, Earth would have a 30-kilometer velocity. That's why Michelson-Morley was so important. That's why Airy's failure was so important. That's why Arago was so important.
This is starting to get into debate, and like I said, I don't. This is not why.
Yeah,
this is not why I came here.
No, you're good. You're good. It's just hard to substantiate using ratios and constants derived off of empirical observation. So it's like trying to relate that to like this has to be physically meaningful. So it's like or it's just algebra. Like we're in this.
So I'm sorry, I am getting a little frustrated. It's because Alan, I don't think you're understanding what I'm saying.
I understand what you're saying. If the masses are similar, you can neglect it. When it's a different mass, it's fine.
No, when the masses are similar, you cannot neglect it.
Oh, I'm sorry, disproportional. My bad. You're right. You did say when there was a disparity, you can neglect the term.
And with that approximate form,
I get what you're saying, but do you get what I'm saying?
When you say things like the mass cancels out, it doesn't. Nothing cancels out.
So did you have a specific?
It's a difference between a precise prediction and an approximate one.
So
the other piece, Alan,
go ahead.
On the slide that you showed, was that you made a statement that it only changes by 0.1%, but the actual statement is that 0.1% of the mass of the sun, which is a significantly different statement than the one you made.
Oh, you're muted.
Thank you for the correction.
So
yeah, no worries. So I guess I mean, I did want to kind of leave it.
You want to have
to end on the point.
I just want to make one second.
Oh, sorry,
Alan. If you want to have a conversation on this specific point and spend 2 hours on it, I'd be happy to do so. I just don't want to get into it at the end of a 2-hour stream that I'm on here, where we were simply talking about how we got into thinking the way that we did. So this is more going towards a specific topic in a debate-like forum. So yeah. So if you want to have that kind of conversation, please let me know, and we can schedule it. Sorry, Morwan. Take it away.
No, I'm glad, Alan, you popped up for a little bit because I know your name was mentioned, and you.
Sorry, my mic was muted.
You're okay.
Thanks, Parks. And yeah, the conversation does tend to go that way when it gets into like asserting the dynamics, because that is like the most important part. Like that's where it gets into mutually exclusivity. So it's like I'm going to make you fight for it.
Yeah. No, this was good. I don't know if Mordwan.
Oh shoot! Did we lose Morty?
I don't know. He's back. He's back. I think
his internet's going.
There we go. Yeah, let's do around the room. We'll start with Alan, and he can drop off and let the original panel say goodbye in however way they want, and then we'll call it a night. Tonight was fun. I thought it was epic. So Alan, go for it. Whatever you want to say to close out, brother.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on. Much appreciated. Sorry it got a little heated, especially towards the end of the conversation where you guys were marathoning it. I know how that goes. And then it's like, now I have to stay and reply to everything. Otherwise, I totally get it. So we'll definitely rain check it. But yeah, so coming up, we got Wednesday and Thursday, we'll be doing TikTok stuff. So stay tuned for that. Now, Sunday is going to be a big Globebusters episode. It's going to be huge. You guys are going to want to stay tuned because we're going to have some new mutually exclusive evidence presented by an actual PhD, somebody with academic credentials is making a mutually exclusive claim on flat Earth. So everyone is going to want to be tuned into Globebusters on Sunday, 3 p.m. sharp, boys and ladettes. Lads and ladettes. Sorry. Make sure you're tuned in for that. It's going to be awesome.
Awesome, bro. Thanks for that. Actually, I'll make one comment real quick. Somebody said, Rumbossa, can you please ask Professor to check out Ken Wheeler's info? He said he wanted to learn. I'm taking me as his word. I didn't want to miss that one comment directed to you. Have you looked into Ken Wheeler?
I have.
Do you have a comment on Ken Wheeler?
I will take a page out of.
I'm heading off.
I will take a page out of Lucky's playbook. It's utter gibberish. The terms that he is using don't make sense in the way that he is using them. It is incomprehensible. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. There is no such thing as counter space. Whatever that means. If you want to see a good debunk of that, actually, I would suggest looking into AB Science. He no longer does videos. He just recently got his PhD in physics with a specialty in magnetism, and he does a video series on Wheeler's seminal sort of work in terms of how magnetism is a force and all that kind of stuff. It's been a while, but that is an excellent debunk for it. So that is my response to that.
Nice. And I know, Professor Parks, you needed to roll out. Did you want to close? Final thoughts?
Sure. Yeah, I really enjoyed this conversation. Again, apologies for getting frustrated with Alan at the end there. I didn't do a very good job of managing myself, I suppose.
I don't think anybody was out of line. You're good.
Managing my expectations, I guess. But yeah, thank you for having me. I love having these conversations. I would love to do more of them with y'all, with others. So yeah, definitely keeping me in mind if you ever want to have these kind of conversations again. In terms of my channel, like, share, subscribe. Like I said, I'm going to be posting a lecture either tonight or tomorrow morning about Kepler's laws. It will simply be an explanation of them. Some point, I will actually go through the nitty gritty and show that these laws are a natural consequence of the existence of gravity. But that's somewhere down the line. What else can I say? Somebody in the chat mentioned Newton's bucket, which is the bane of my existence. No, sorry. If you saw my debate, as it were, with Dr. Bennett, he brought up Newton's bucket a lot. And so, a friend of mine, I can science that. He's actually suggested doing a stream on that subject. And so I was reticent, but now, yeah, why not? So I will contact Matt and we will set that up and we will discuss Newton's bucket in terms of accepted physics, or however you want to put it.
Nice.
All right, and I will sign off with peace out, and clear skies, and God bless.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Have a good night.
I enjoyed it.
Mordwan, you're up.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say, Joe, thank you so much for coming on. I've been extremely impressed with your, focus on the things that you've done personally, your personal journey, like what makes sense to you. And I think that in terms of like just your humbleness, in terms of like understanding that ultimately you're just trying to learn God's creation, and it's been a real pleasure talking to you. I would like to get into more of the specifics. Obviously, it's a little bit difficult in a short period like this. Some of the cooler stuff you have with your model, particularly what you were describing with the phases of the moon. That would be very cool. I always have a ton of respect for people, even if I disagree with them, if they are putting in the work to model and be creative. And it takes courage to put yourself out there like that. So I want to commend you for that. And then to my good pal, Run Boston Bear, great chill moderation. And thank you so much for having us on. From my side, our major announcements is there's going to be a big drop in the next week or so, which I'm not going to divulge the topic of, but it will be, I think, pretty cool. And looking for feedback on that once it comes out. And then I'm also going to be working on some new stuff in the coming quarter. I have a video in the works on the dynamics of the discovery of Neptune, which kind of plays into the conversation that Dr. Parks and Alan were having. So looking forward to that as well.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for coming. I didn't even have to moderate at all. Everything was chill. I think we got along well. And thanks again for getting this lined out. Hope you have a good evening.
Yeah, I absolutely enjoyed it too. Didn't really know what to expect. Run Boston knows that I'm not someone who likes to really get into heated debates. With me, it's at this point, nobody's ever going to change my mind. I'm just going to keep working towards trying to figure out how it's working to the best of my ability. Well, I wouldn't say nobody's ever going to change my mind, because that would be incorrect. It would take some very hard evidence to change my mind at this point. And I just haven't seen it. I see a lot of concepts and theories, but I haven't seen any hard evidence that can't be explained by other modalities. So that's just kind of where I stand. But I enjoyed the conversation. I enjoyed Dr. Parks, Mordwan. You guys were awesome. run Boston Berry. You're always on point. So, and Alan, we appreciate you coming in, man. You always have some good stuff to add. Very chill, very peaceful. So had a good time.
Yeah, dude, I appreciate, your heart, and I know you're doing it for the truth. And like I said earlier, you're not doing it to impress anybody. And you have worked hard. You've got a lot of equipment together. You've done a lot of experiments and testing, and you don't claim to have it perfect, but you're just trying to show proof of concept. And yeah, you're a friend. And I mean, if it's a globe and we got tricked into flat Earth, well, I'll go back to the globe. But there's just, like you said, there's not at this point. I can't make that jump. Just because when I kind of like woke up from kind of the fog of heliocentric, a life of believing in heliocentrism, I didn't realize that I was actually disconnected from nature a little bit. Some people might think that sounds weird, but as I started asking questions about this realm and what was and that's what got my wife to even like allow me to look, is I said, I want to know what the creator made, not what man told me is out there. And it's been beautiful to realize we're on a stationary topographical plane Earth, and not moving 1.9 million miles per day. But, if I'm wrong, I'll adjust because I'm a truth seeker. I'm not, dogmatically religious about anything. Some people are like, dude, you needed flat Earth because you were lonely and you're a loser. It's like, dude, I've got a great family. I don't need anything. So yeah, I'll pursue the truth every day. And thanks, chat, for hanging out. Yeah, I think when I shut this stream off, dude, it's going to show a promo video for the Antarctic Ice Marathon. And in the very bottom of the description, if you want to donate, throw me $5, $10, whatever, it's $22,500 to sign up for this race. But I want to go to Union Glacier Camp this December 13th and race hard the ice marathon. So that's going to be the last video that plays when I hit end stream. Enjoy it. This video was the day before the TFE people showed up down there. So pretty cool.
Let me close out with one more thing.
Do it.
Just about the modeling and everything.
Yeah, do it.
So and I'm going to try to say this in the most polite way that I can, for all the people who want to try to critique, who aren't, like Mordwan said, actually putting forth effort. They're not doing their own work. They're not doing anything other than being a couch critic or a internet cowboy. If you do that on any of my sites, it's going to get you blocked, because I don't care to argue. I don't care to change your mind. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here to put out my journey. I tell everybody, don't cling to a model. Don't cling to me. I'm putting out my journey. I'm trying to learn as I go. This particular model is in a very early prototypical stage. So it's weird to try to debunk something before it's even finished. That to me seems odd. You would think it would be like, well, let's let them work it all out first, because it does seem that things are working, or at least can be proof of concept shown that they can work. So that's just kind of where I stand with the model, and I'm going to keep working on it. Could I be wrong? Yeah, I think God is too big for us. This realm is too big for us to fully understand. However, I think it's actually of God's heart for us to search it out. Proverbs 25:2. It's the heart of God to conceal a matter. It's the heart of kings to search it out. Proverbs 4:7, wisdom is the key thing. Therefore, in all you're getting, get understanding. 1 Peter 3:15, be ready to give a defense to any man who asks a reason for the hope that's in you. And we can just go on and on with, Jeremiah 33:3, call out to me, and I will show you great and mighty things that you know not. There's just verse after verse after verse that tell us to pursue knowledge and to pursue wisdom and to pursue connection, and that we're left without excuse in regards to the creator because of his creation. And he made it a huge point to not only describe his creation, but to start his book with it and end his book with it, at least details about the creation. So it's something that's close to my heart. I'm going to keep working on things. I will get things better with time. I have tons of ideas, but if you're just going to be a couch critic who has no body of work of their own, or they're not putting forth any effort to to create a body of work of their own, then you're going to get blocked, because it's just, I'm not going to waste my time with that. Take that as you want. It's nothing against you. I don't hold any grudges or anything. I just don't have time for that. I would much rather just keep pushing down the path that I've been going down and seeing the results as they come out.
There you go. Hey, man, I'm going to close it out in prayer. Why not? Heavenly Father, thanks for this amazing stream. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to these men about faith, what we believe, what we think about where we live. Ultimately, we're grateful for what you created for us, and we're grateful for this life that we're living. Help us to be vulnerable and be transparent and be open and honest with others as we pursue the truth together. Protect us from the evil one, the darkness, the lies, the deception, because they are out there. And we just trust you. We ask for guidance. We ask for wisdom and knowledge, not so we can be haughty about it or have big egos, but so that we can lead other people to the truth. And thank you for what your son did on the cross. And we pray this in Yeshua's holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks, brother. We'll see you next
Appreciate
time.
You, yeah. Thanks. Have a good night.
Peace.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you.